as previously reported, Dillian Whyte has now been moved up to number 4 in the WBC World Heavyweight Rankings, which puts him in a position where he may be offered an eliminator, if not a final eliminator, against somebody else in the top 4. At this point in time, I would assume the most likely individual that Dillian Whyte will be offered a fight against will be Kubrat Pulev in some type of eliminator. That's an interesting matchup. Pulev is, I would say, a limited boxer in terms of, he's not that versatile. He can't really fight on the inside. His punch selection, not even his punch selection, his punch variety is very limited. But what he does well, Kubrat Pulev, he does, in my opinion, very well, which is utilize a very, very good jab and control range and distance from the outside. His right hand is there, but it's nothing special. You don't really see him knocking people out cold or even dropping people a lot of the time with his right hand. It does happen, but he's primarily a jab guy. He likes to hit people and occasionally hurt people with that jab. He has actually dropped and stopped people with his jab, as incredible as that is, but he does have a fantastic left jab. And you look at Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte has a more, expanded vocabulary in a boxing sense. I'm not talking about in a literal sense, but in a boxing sense, Dillian Whyte has greater punch variety. He can fight on the inside. He can fight on the outside. He can brawl. He can box. But his skills on the outside are not as well refined as Kubrat Pulev's are. Even though he's got a more rounded game, he is not as effective at long range as Pulev is. Both guys are listed at 6'4". In fact, Pulev is listed at 6'4.5". The reach, I'm assuming, is probably around the same for both of them. Pulev maybe a slight advantage in terms of reach. I think it would be a mistake of Dillian Whyte, if this fight were to happen, to try and box Pulev on the outside. Obviously, he's got to use his jab and he's got to do certain things, but he would have to pressure Kubrat Pulev, because if it turns into just a pure boxing match, Pulev was a very, very experienced international amateur, and I just don't see Dillian Whyte being able to outbox Kubrat Pulev on the outside. I just don't see it. I think Pulev is too good in that particular area for Dillian Whyte to be able to beat him there. I mean, just compare Kubrat Pulev's performance against Derek Chisora to Dillian Whyte's performance against Chisora. Kubrat Pulev beat Chisora far more convincingly and far easier than Dillian Whyte did. In fact, many people believe that Dillian Whyte didn't even beat Chisora. Yes, it was a close fight, but many people thought Chisora nicked it. So that just illustrates how effective Kubrat Pulev is at long range as compared to Dillian Whyte. So I think Dillian Whyte would have to press the action. He'd have to live up to his nickname, the body snatcher, go to the body, use physical strength, because ever since the loss that Pulev suffered to Vladimir Klitschko, he has incorporated clinching a lot more into his game. This is clearly something that he's been working on, and we saw that in the Chisora fight. He shut Chisora down completely on the inside with clinching. And I guess that's something Dillian Whyte didn't do against Chisora. But all the better for the fans. It was more entertaining watching Dillian Whyte versus Chisora than Pulev versus Chisora. But it was certainly effective what Pulev did, although I did think he was borderline excessive with the holding against Chisora. And given that the fight was in Germany, Pulev's adopted, well, actually, it's not really Pulev's adopted home country, because he does, well, he just recently fought in Bulgaria. But he has fought a lot of his fights in Germany. Let's not get it twisted. So he is one of those Eastern European fighters that bases himself in Germany to a large degree. And perhaps the officiating in that situation was a little favorable towards him and allowed him to get away with more holding than he would normally get away with in a neutral venue. In fact, Pulev, I seem to remember, actually said after the fight that he did too much holding and that he was a little embarrassed that he actually did too much holding, because Pulev was somebody who used to criticize Vladimir Klitschko a lot for excessive holding. But whatever the case may be, Dillian Whyte is going to have to make it physical, I think, if this fight takes place. And be able to shove Pulev off if Pulev does decide to hold. I think that's something that Dillian Whyte would have to work on. Breaking free from clinches, getting hands free, going to the body, and just roughing Kubrat Pulev up. I don't see Dillian Whyte versus Kubrat Pulev being like the Chisora fight, because Dillian Whyte is taller than Chisora. He's got longer arms than Chisora, a better jab, and he can box better. Well, let me take back the better jab, because I actually think Chisora's jab was better than Dillian Whyte's jab in their particular fight. Although, you know, I've seen Dillian Whyte's jab look a lot better than it was in the Chisora fight. So I'll reserve my judgment about who has the better jab between Whyte and Chisora for now. But certainly Dillian Whyte is taller, longer arms, and he can box on the outside, boxing on the inside, so on and so forth. So he's got a good variety of punches, and being a bigger man than Chisora, he should present a different puzzle for Kubrat Pulev to solve than Chisora presented. It should be a more complicated fight for Kubrat Pulev than the Chisora fight was. That's what I envisage. It's a very difficult fight, and it would be understandable for Kubrat Pulev to be the favorite in this fight. And in fact, if the fight does get made, that's what I'm expecting the bookies to have in terms of odds. I'm expecting them to be making Kubrat Pulev the favorite. Maybe not a massive favorite, but certainly a favorite. Drop your comments in the comment section below, people. This fight, as I say, will probably be offered to Dillian Whyte, I would imagine. So it's certainly realistic to speculate about it happening. If it does happen, how do you see the fight going? Who would you pick? How would the fight play out? And is it a fight that you like? Personally, I really like this fight. I think it's a good fight. And I have done a video. Have I done a video actually? I better check if I've even done a video about Stiverne versus Ortiz, the possibility of that fight happening. Maybe I need to do a dedicated video to that if I haven't done so already. I do so many videos, I forget what I've done videos about. I'll have to go check my channel. So for now, let me know what you think about Kubrat Pulev versus Dillian Whyte. One thing I would say is that Pulev Whyte will most likely go the distance, because I do think Dillian Whyte hits harder than Pulev. But does he hit hard enough to knock Pulev out? Does he have the skill to be able to get past Pulev's long-range game and land enough concussive shots to actually get Pulev out of there? I doubt it. I'm not saying Dillian Whyte don't have skills. He does have decent skills. But good enough to negate Pulev's skills and also land enough clean shots to take him out? I doubt it. I see the fight going the distance. And Dillian Whyte needs to put pressure on Eddie Hearn, because if this fight goes to a purse bid situation, it's really going to benefit Dillian Whyte if it happens in the UK rather than in Germany or in Bulgaria. Pulev is obviously with the Sauerlands. They work closely with Eddie Hearn, but they're competitors at the same time. So if it goes to a purse bid, Dillian Whyte needs to put pressure on Eddie Hearn and say, look, get this fight in the UK. You know, because as I say, I think it's likely going to go the distance if it takes place, and it's going to be competitive. It's going to be an interesting fight. So let me not waffle on too long. Let me know what you think about this potential matchup. Who would win? How would it play out? All right, it's happening. I'm out.